So welcome to the January 2026 edition of Talent Matters, where we are going to look into our crystal ball and predict what we're going to see from a leadership perspective in 2026.
Yes, and this is the first time I realized in 3 months I have a voice for our webcast.
Well, that's good, because mine's not so great.
Yeah, well, one of us has to. Remember, there's always 3 things we have to tell you from a housekeeping perspective. One is expect this to go about 30 to 40 minutes, depending on how excited we are about certain slides and questions. The second is that if you have anything you want to ask us, put it in the chat, and we'll try to address it as it comes up. And the third thing is, if you fill out the form at the end, we will get you all of the information that you need, any of the resources and these slides within a day or two of when you're seeing this video.
Yeah, so let's understand what we see in 2026. So one of the important things is to put a plan together, understand what you need out of your leaders this year. It's still a transitional year with all the different technology challenges that we're dealing with. We're learning a lot that needs to be applied in 2026 from 2025. And we kind of see this as a breakout year. 2025 set the table. 2026, I think, is when we're going to, from a leadership perspective, leverage all of our learnings and get us in a trajectory we haven't had in a long time.
Yeah, not everybody, but there was a lot of holding your breath in 2025. There's a lot of uncertainty. A lot of organizations took the time to strip the dead weight, to put some processes and systems in place, tighten things up, hoping that 2026 was going to be a breakout and they'd be well positioned to hit that. And we're feeling that already. The conversations in January alone are much better than they were for the entire fourth quarter.
Yeah, I really think people or leaders have caught their breath now, are comfortable with the changes going on, both in hiring, in AI, out of Washington, globally. All these things that were thrown at them in 2025 have been digested, and I think the entrepreneurs and the leaders are ready to get off the sidelines.
Yeah. Tired of sitting on the sidelines, got to have some action. Any action is better than no action for an entrepreneur.
So a little bit about the Bennis Group. We're coming up on 30 years in the next couple of months now.
Don't miss
My gosh,
March, because that's our anniversary.
That'll be a biggie. Our 2 areas of focus. One is bringing in the right people, our hiring processes, and number 2 is developing those leaders and getting the most out of your leadership team. We have a leadership academy that most of this service offering is housed under. We have a location in Charlotte, North Carolina, one in Detroit, where we're serving companies all through the U.S. and globally.
Yes, primarily in the continental U.S., but we have been known to do some work overseas, especially when there's a U.S. presence, because as most Americans, we speak English. So, but I started the business in Detroit. It'll be 30 years ago, March 5th, and then expanded into Charlotte 10 years later, and finally moved full-time into the Charlotte area just 5 years ago. It's hard to believe. Yeah. That time's gone by very, very quickly. We still have team members in Detroit and Charlotte, and trying to take care of all of our clients and make a difference.
So here are the 6 trends that we wanted to focus on today and what we are thinking are going to be an impact in 2026. Obviously AI and where AI is going now. And one of the areas that we think is a big difference this year is AI is becoming more common and more adopted. We're going to talk a little bit about EQ and how emotional intelligence is becoming more and more important in today's workplace, along with critical thinking and how that is playing out. And this whole AI honeymoon over, what does that mean now that it's been adopted and moving on from its newness? And then understanding intuition. I think I've heard 4 or 5 podcasts in the last month talking about human intuition and what that is playing out now. And largely that's coming from AI and why we think human intuition is something that's important. And then roles are constantly changing now. We need to have more clarity around what people are, what's expected out of people and what they're going to be doing. And we want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting when you look at these 6 topics. We're talking about AI and we're talking about emotional intelligence, and they almost seem
And
like
intuition.
and
Yeah,
intuition.
yeah.
So it's a really odd combination of things that we're seeing come together in 2026. So being aware of that, keeping your eyes and ears open should help you be more sensitive to what you're going to
Yeah,
be.
I think that's a good
feeling.
point. I think what we're seeing now is that combination of technology and humanization, and how leaders got to straddle those two areas and bring them together. And what we've learned is the AI and the technology is great, but there's still a human component that needs to be applied,
Yep.
whether it's through emotional intelligence or intuition or whatever it might be.
Right.
So what's going to happen with AI? We don't know. We just know that it's becoming more and more prevalent in the workplace, and the divide between those who are using it and those who are not is shrinking. I think most people now are using it at least for search, or at least for some of the basics. Those who are advanced in it are using it more for assistants and agents, but it's best being adopted to make individuals more productive, whether it's using it as a personal assistant or understanding how to get more out of their routine work. But it's just that integration now into the everyday workflows that AI is making a big difference on.
Yeah, I think you can assume that for the most part, most individuals are comfortable with using AI in lieu of a Google search. But that's not really leveraging what AI can do. Helping you learn things, teach us, help me figure out the best way to create a podcast. How should we be publishing these podcasts? What are some of the things step by step I need to learn? And teaching you how to learn new things is really amazing, as opposed to just what was the score of the basketball game last night.
Yeah, and this last point about an AI optimization, a consultant, a funny thing, McKinsey Consulting Company, the world's largest, most successful consulting company, suffered a business hit these last couple of years, as a lot of their clientele has been getting their consulting from AI. And McKinsey's business has dropped considerably as a result. What they have done to make up for that loss is they're introducing this AI consultancy into their practice, where their consultants now come into organizations and teach and show them how to leverage AI in their workflows to maximize the effectiveness of it. That is so it's a perfect example of an organization who went from very, very high to felt a dip as a result of AI, but now are climbing back up using AI to further their business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how that gets leveraged in the future. But using AI to teach you how to use AI is also something that I think people are underestimating. And we certainly have been using that at home and at work.
So AI has now uncovered a challenge we have in the workplace around emotional intelligence. Sure, you can get all the facts that you want from AI, and you can get a lot of hard solutions, but we still don't have that emotional component. And that focus on hard skill is being redirected to a focus on soft skill. The fact of the matter is, the hard skills we hired for 2 years ago are almost obsolete. However, the soft skills that came with those hard skills 2 years ago are more important now than they've ever been. So AI has kind of leveled things out a little bit on the IQ front, but it's the emotional part of it, the soft skill part of it, that that is going to be the differentiator.
I think one of the other things to keep in mind is that the brain makes decisions based on emotional impulses. It is not based on data. And there's all kinds of information out there that'll support that. There's an older book that I revisited recently called How We Decide. It's a tremendous book, and it's really more emotional pieces impacting that decision. So you can get all the data you want from AI, but that's still not necessarily how people actually decide. The other thing that's important is when you're making buying decisions, most of those are emotionally based. Jonathan B. Smith just published a book within this let's see, by the time you see this, it's going to be a week ago, called Fight Less, Win More. He is one of the collaborators with Chris Voss, who's one of the best negotiators ever. And they're talking about the difference between empathy and sympathy, and that it's the empathetic negotiator, the person who can understand where the other person is coming from and talk to those points, that is actually being able to have that upper hand in negotiations. And so it's really, they talk about tactical empathy, and it's how to really employ empathy from a tactical level. The emotional intelligence 360s that we use talk about the impact of EQ in decision making, in stress tolerance, all the things that are impacting us today. And so those organizations that leverage AI but ignore EQ, I think, are going to suffer the biggest deficit, because they don't understand the impact on others, how to leverage those things, how to deal with the fear factor, how to deal with kind of the trust issue that comes into play with AI. And so it's really, the EQ really is going to be the differentiator, those who can leverage that. Yeah, AI is just permission to play. EQ is going to be the differentiator.
Yeah, it's going to be that focus on the soft skills. And we hear our clients tell us all the time that they hire for hard skills, but they fire for soft skills. It's that soft skill gap that we really need to focus on in 2026. Mm-hmm. So along the same lines, one of the things that is becoming more of a differentiator is the ability to think critically. And AI has helped from a standpoint where it has lots of knowledge. It's like an encyclopedia on steroids. However, being able to take that knowledge and make critical judgments requires the humans to understand their bias. It requires us to understand probability and statistics a little bit in evaluating that. These are things that AI is not great at. AI is great at providing that background knowledge to make the decision. AI is really good at giving different types of scenarios, but it is not quite there on the critical thinking yet. And for us to be able to leverage that this year is going to be important.
Yeah, and I think the reading the classics, getting back to some of the basics, and again, leveraging AI for that. John's been embarking on some of the old classics of reading, back to Shakespeare, and he's asked ChatGPT or Grok to tell him what this one paragraph meant, or one segment from the play. We're seeing our grandkids in school trying to wrap their head around reading and math and stuff, and asking ChatGPT to create some flashcards for them that actually focuses on the things that they're trying to learn, so that their brain is, those synapses can fire off a little bit better.
Yeah, one of the things that we're seeing the colleges focus on now more than ever are the arts. And not necessarily as much focus on the hard skills and all the STEM approaches, but getting back to the basics and reading Dickens and Shakespeare and some of the classics that have shaped our thinking for the longest time are now being reintroduced to a generation that has been growing up with an iPhone.
The other thing that we realize in leveraging the arts is that there is proof positive that musicians tend to be much better at math than those people who have never touched any type of musical instruction. So, it's a balance.
Right.
Back to the balance.
And as leaders, we need to encourage our team to develop by reading more fiction or understanding different parts of the artistic experience that we may not have focused on in the past. And that's really what's going to differentiate our thinking as AI becomes more and more prevalent in the workplace.
Yeah, I remember when John was a avid consumer of all things nonfiction, and then eventually was reading a lot about how reading fiction actually teaches your brain to imagine and to think ahead about what could be the next step in this plot. Where are the twists going to come from? So imagine what that elasticity of your brain does when it's learning how to do that regularly in fiction, and then can be applied in real life and business, and it gives you a huge advantage than those who are just set up with
And the classics are so much more accessible now with AI to help interpret some of that old style language and being able to modernize it a little bit. It's really an area that I think leaders can leverage and grow their team through. So I love this one. The AI, we're calling it the AI honeymoon is over in 2026. We're past the goo goo gaga stage of the relationship, and we're now moving into it becoming a part of the everyday. One of the things that people are starting to recognize is AI isn't always right. It doesn't always have the answers, and
Especially if you're trying to fix an appliance at home.
yeah. I heard recently somebody asked AI to help them diagnose and fix a problem with their television.
Yeah.
And it did a phenomenal job understanding what the issue was and helping them understand what it would take to correct it and fix the problem. And then this person asked for 3 repair people in the area who could do that. All 3 of them were fictional repair. None of them were accurate.
Not one real business.
Right. So I think what that's telling us, AI can be a real help, but we need to verify
Trust,
what we're getting
but
back
verify.
on. Exactly.
Yes.
And unfortunately, the skeptics of AI are now kind of having their day in the sun as more and more of these problems are talked about. There's, the I told you so's are coming out now. That shouldn't be a reason to discard it, but it does need to be a reason for us to question what we're getting out of it.
Well, I think, again, if you're developing your critical thinking and you're developing your emotional intelligence and you go to AI for a solution, you have to apply your own reasoning to go, get out of here, that's not going to work. Or, I'm hearing people say, I'm having a problem with Suzy Q, works for me. So it's great to go into your computer and just type out all the stuff that's making you crazy about Suzy Q and saying, how should I address this? Well, AI isn't applying the emotional intelligence about understanding everything, this whole human who's coming to work and the challenges that she's having and the type of behavior techniques that she responds to and that she doesn't. And so those types of things still have to be processed through the human interaction.
Yeah, and again, this isn't saying that we're going to abandon AI, and it is becoming more and more a part of our workflow. We just need to understand the limitations. Now, this is the worst it's ever going to be. All right.
Every second is getting
exactly. AI is going to learn that the repair people in a particular area to fix your TV are going to be the real people at some point. But it's that trust but verify approach that you use with new hires or with your kids that you now need to think about doing when you're using AI.
Mm-hmm. It's my favorite.
Gut instinct. So it's a real thing. That sixth sense that has been talked about forever is now becoming more and more talked about as AI is coming into play, and AI is proving it doesn't have that instinct. It doesn't have that
Sixth
sense that you get from experience or that 10,000 hours. And that, so Kahneman talked about it in terms of System 1 and System 2 thinking. That quick, sharp System 1 thinking that comes from the gut is something we need to recognize and leverage in 2026.
Probably the book that was most consumed easily by people was Blink, and that was that by Kahneman or was that
No, that was
Goldman? Daniel Pink.
Gladwell.
Yeah. It's one of these guys, right? So he wrote Blink, and it was on that 10,000 hours piece, but it was basically, how an expert, after having put in whether it's 10,000 or 5,000 or 50,000 deliberate hours of study, how they can look at something and immediately tell that's not right or this. But when they were asked, why do you think that's not right? And they had to justify their answer with specific tactical things that they were wrong on the things they were trying to come up with to justify it. Their instinct was correct. But when they tried to justify it in the way normal people would express themselves, it was way off base. In fact, sometimes they can talk themselves into a different solution. The book that I was talking about and How We Decide talked about that a lot. And towards the end, that whole instinctual piece, that sixth sense, and how it emphasized that really can't be underestimated. Dan Brown came out with a book in 2025 that wound up talking a lot about the sixth sense from a fictional perspective, but he does a lot of research before he writes this fiction. So the intuition is good over analytics. If you're doing a lot of analysis and then you let it be and you walk away, it's your subconscious that's accessing your intuition. You can overanalyze the heck out of things and actually be wrong, but consuming the data and then walking away from it, taking a nap, watching something mindless, listening to some instrumental music, those things can often bring the solution to fruition just because your subconscious has been allowed to take over all that consumption of data.
Yeah, I think the important thing for leaders to understand is they still need to trust their gut. They still need to trust their instincts and not necessarily rely on AI or an outsider's opinion. When it comes down to that differentiator, that gut instinct isn't something that you're going to get off the internet.
Yeah, and it's especially true, we work with a lot of organizations that run on EOS, and it's especially true for the visionary and the integrator combination, or the visionary and the rest of the team. These visionaries typically have that heightened intuition, and they can anticipate things that are coming and stuff. Sometimes they can be too far ahead of the curve. It's happened to us in the 30 years we've been in business. There are times I've come up with something and said, this is going to be it. This is where everybody's going. We're going to have to do this. We become experts in some new tool or some new, and then we're waiting for the need to develop because I was a little too far ahead and I might have been too aggressive in pushing the organization. So sometimes the rest of the organization needs to say, okay, the intuition is good, that's good, but let's look at some data as to when and where we want to introduce this, not just go jumping off a cliff.
Right. So again, leaders, trust your gut. That's something that is unique, and we don't want to underestimate the value of it. The final area that we're seeing a need for in 2026 is our roles are changing almost every day or every week. Something is different about our role. It could be because of technology. It could be a different reliance on a soft skill. As a result, these roles need to have some clarity assigned to them as they're changing. The jobs that are being done today didn't look the way they did a year or two ago. And so using a job description that was developed or a scorecard that was developed a year or 2 years ago
that hasn't been updated.
Exactly. May not apply now as the role has evolved.
The other thing that's interesting is some of you know we access the expertise and wisdom of Brian Walby from Walby Associates. And so we had a question submitted before this webcast on compensation, and we're going to address that in the Q&A. But one of the things he talked about is there's still a lot of unknown around job clarity for positions that leverage AI. So that is probably the biggest growing field, but there is the least amount of clarity around those roles, which means there is the least amount of salary data about what you should actually be paying these people because nobody has it. And so then he and I were sharing information about, well, can you, is AI being leveraged to create some of this role clarity? And he said it's probably less about that because there are so many different things that it can incorporate. And if it doesn't have the right person navigating that AI, it might come up with a great fictitious job. So this role clarity, especially around those AI roles, is going to be really interesting.
Yeah, and the jobs are different. We have a client who has an administrative assistant, and we help them put the scorecard together for that role. And when they originally put the scorecard together, over 20% of that administrative assistant time was around travel and coordinating different parts of the travel logistics. Well, now with ChatGPT helping with those logistics, it is less than 10% of the job, which means this role now has another 10 to 15% to be applied in other areas. If they haven't updated that scorecard yet, that administrative assistant still thinks they're going to be spending a day a week on travel, and that is simply not the case any longer.
Right.
So that role clarity and updating those scorecards with today's workflows is
more important than ever, yeah.
So those are the 6 that we think are going to be coming into play for the year, understanding what AI is going to be doing in the workplace, bringing in those soft skills as a result of the AI integration, focusing on that critical thinking and all the different parts that are a part of that, learning to trust but verify as AI is being relied on more and more in the workplace. And that gut instinct is something that is as important now as it ever has. And then staying on top of the job definitions and understanding what the descriptions and the scorecards and the clarity ought to look like in the roles. Those are the areas we think leaders need to focus on in 2026.
So, some of the questions. Wait, this is for the.
Yeah, we got a couple of questions coming. First of all, if you, we talked a little bit about job clarity. If you scan the QR code here, it'll take you to some feedback form. Give us a little bit of feedback on what you thought about the session, and then you'll get an example of a job scorecard that we recommend to provide some of that role clarity for roles.
Is there a Q&A slide?
Nope, no.
Okay. So one of the questions that we had submitted was specifically around what do we see happening with salary trends in 2026. Interestingly enough, so I reached out to Brian Walby of Walby and Associates. He is the guru of gurus when it comes to compensation. He said it looks like the data is telling us that the average salary increase in 2026 is going to be about 3.6%. That's pretty modest. Those were some old-time numbers that I remember seeing in my early days in HR in compensation. So back when I was in compensation, we were looking at 3.3, 3.6 numbers, and so it's not in the crazy mode it was back before COVID. The average structure movement is 2.6%. For those of you who don't understand, just real quickly, you will always have a structure movement lower than what the average salary increase is because you want your good performers to make progress in your salary band. So if your salary band is this big, over time, people should make it from the first quarter to the second quarter, past midpoint, et cetera. So the structure movement is only moving 2.6%, but the average salary increase is 3.6. Remember, that's average. That does not mean you should automatically give everybody 3.6%. What is interesting is 40% of companies do not have any formal structure at all. The reason this is going to be important goes back to those AI jobs. If you have structure for your compensation plan now, you can at least manage those new jobs that nobody understands from an internal equity perspective. So if you're looking at a brand new job and it's requiring certain soft skills and the ability to figure stuff out on AI is probably more than anything, is this worth more or less than a programmer? Is it worth more or less than your CFO? So if you can't get the market data, because there just isn't the market data right now, at least you can look at the internal equity and look at other jobs that you would value just as much and put it into that same salary band. So I would strongly encourage those of you who don't have any salary structure to consider maybe something like that to help manage 2026.
Yep. We have one other question on college grads and the hiring experience that they're going through and what we see in 2026. I just read an interesting article recently. The challenge with college grads and new hires now with AI is they all have phenomenally good-looking resumes.
I would hope.
They're all putting together amazing cover letters. They are all getting really good at interviewing because AI is helping them interview. So the playing field has leveled. As a result, what hiring managers are starting to look at are things like the experiences they had in college, the colleges that they went to.
The extracurricular activities.
Exactly. So the hiring of these college grads has become a bit more of a challenge because on paper and during the interview process, they all look really, really good. And so what hiring teams are doing is they're hiring now from the traditionally strong colleges because that's really the only differentiator that they're finding.
One last thing on that is that a lot of organizations feel ill-prepared because they don't have a good selection process and they're like, we're going to leverage AI. And I just have been hearing about some horrible things that's happening, especially in the medical field with AI interviewing. So a friend of ours has a phenomenal daughter who is now looking at residency programs. And so she's in the medical field. It's going to require some people skills, right? And she has the profile that is a little bit more of an introvert, so she's very cautious about what she's prescribing, things like this. But she is warm, she is genuine, she's very process-oriented. And the interview system had AI on her computer screen asking her a question, and then there's a timer in the corner timing how long she has to come up with the answer real quick. And so she's looking at this and she's flabbergasted because this goes against her profile of being warm and genuine. She's trying to answer the question fast so that she can hit next, and the next question comes up, and then she's got the timer going and she's trying to answer it. This is the worst way to decide if somebody's going to be a good PA. So a physician's assistant, and you're deciding who comes into your residency program, it's really a lazy approach from organizations, and they could be very well screening out the very people they need to put into their program. So there's another way that these college grads are trying to navigate the difference between the AI and the EQ. So.
All right, so keep the questions coming. We'll be happy to go back and answer them all. Coming up next is the February session. We're going to talk about succession planning and all the different components that go into that. That's becoming more and more important today than ever, as a lot of these senior leaders are leaving. They don't want to worry about the new world. They're moving on.
They don't want to deal with the AI.
So what are we doing? Exactly. So what are we going to do to replace that talent? And then March, we're going to talk about holding team members accountable and different approaches around maintaining that productivity. And then we're going to move into core values on hiring, which I think we got a blog out recently.
Yeah,
on.
and then we've got some real life experiences that are hysterical.
So sign up for any one of those sessions today. And those who have signed up for this session will be getting the materials either today or tomorrow, the recording, the slides, and then some other
Job
assets.
scorecard. Yep. So don't forget to submit questions even in advance, and we'll try to put them right into the webcast coming up.
All right, I'm John Gave. This is Cindy Gave. Another episode of Talent Matters, and we will hope to see you next month.
Let's rock 2026.